Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. It's 2024 and this is my first recording of the year. I'm very excited. And we're blessing your ears with two hosts today. My name's Roxanne. You can refer to me as she, her. I am a host on Game Dev London, which I hope is the obvious one. I am head of marketing and production at Fribbly Games, and I'm the Marcoms lead at Riot Games. And with me today, I have.
Hello, me again. If you've been listening consistently this year, you might already be sick of my voice. Stuart Ville, he, him, CEO, Game of London, uh, co-founder with Roxanne, Fribbly Games, and freelance games asset creator, and just a million other things.
Today, we are talking about being authentic and what that means to us, how we have seen that impact and change us over our journeys in games and beyond. Um, and hopefully share a little bit of knowledge of how to truly feel like you are bringing your authentic self to work, to your friends and family, and just to kind of everyday life. Um, I think I wanted to start with what we both think that really means about being authentic. I think, especially anyone who's trying to build a career or um, trying to change their career or move around, or maybe you're just kind of finishing school, even you'll see a lot of topics around your personal brand and being your true self. And I didn't really understand actually what that meant until probably very recently, actually, over the last few years. Actually, even in lockdown, I think when I didn't have to show up as anyone else for the first time in a long time. And it allowed me to start being my authentic self. And I've had this big journey of self-discovery since then. But I never really understood what it meant. I was always trying to be something for someone else or something else. And but because I would add a little of my own quirk to it, I was like, this is me though. This is my authentic self. I don't know if you've had a similar journey, Stu, with it.
Almost exactly the same, really. Yeah. So, um, starting out in the job world, in fact, starting out at college, I would probably
Mm.
say. At college, I went from being um, the quiet kid at school to the quiet kid at college, with the exception of the fact that um, I was allowed to buy my own clothes fully for the first time, and I really loved like goth clothing. So I went in full goth, um, and for the first time ever at college, well, for the first time ever in any kind of setting like that, like especially education setting, I suddenly wasn't like this nobody knows who I am kid. I was like, oh, that's the goth kid, and also like that's the goth kid that's in my art class, like because I was studying art. So that's kind of like the first place where I experienced this whole like, oh, okay, so I can have like a thing that is me and it's like stuff that I like. But then once I hit the work industry, um, yeah, I would just not you can't do it. I think in fact my first job, yeah, I was in like full staff uniform. And you just kind of from that moment you kind of realize that you can't just be this whoever you are when you're fully free to be who you are. You have to conform to, which is why uniforms exist to a certain extent. But
Mm.
yeah, same as you. It took me to until joining the games industry where I kind of felt like I could do a bit of both and not just be Mr. fully professional all the time. I could actually eke out a bit of myself. But even then, same as you, when I started out, it was just like I'm me, but I'm also like professional me, and like where's the so I was like a little bit quirky, but never fully. And now I'm just like, yeah, whatever. This is me, man. Like whatever, however I show up now is it's me. Although to be fair, me now is a mix of like a professional me because
Mm.
that's become like part of who I am. So
I think it's really interesting you bring up professionalism because I think that really impacts a lot of people in the sense that we still have this idea of what that means. And even being
Mm,
in the games industry, we have this archaic sense that you have to show up in a certain way or speak a certain way because you're at work.
mm,
And when your environment is just that and that's all you see, it's really hard not to do it as well, even if you can identify it and be like, I'm not showing up as myself because I'm in this environment. Because in my last job, which wasn't in the games industry, when I did start to show up a bit more as myself, I was very obviously out of place. And I would constantly have this battle of, well, do I do it anyway because it's what makes me feel good? But I wasn't feeling good because I felt very outed,
mm.
even though, no one was saying that to me, but I was very obviously different from everyone in my entire office.
Yeah.
I stuck out like a sore thumb, and not just my interests, but the way I dress and the way I style myself. I was very obviously an other to everyone else in the office who were not kind of suited and booted, but much more professional than where I am, or what is deemed to be professional than where I am now, where I can, for the first time in my professional career since working with you, with Fribbly and at Riot, is I don't have to think about that at all.
Mm.
And it's so freeing. And also, it just gives you space to think about other more important bloody things.
Yeah. Yeah. Way more important things. I think
We end
also,
up,
go on.
I was going to say, we end up kind of crushing ourselves to this point, which is what I found, where I was like, who even am I now? I didn't know at one point. I had completely lost sight of it. And it's really
Mm.
hard to re-find yourself when you're at that point.
Yeah. I think for me, like, what what being professional means has completely changed because it used to mean that you conform to company norms and you keep your head down, you work hard, and you try and impress your boss. You try and not look like you need to be climbing the ladder but not look like you're climbing the ladder, and you need to like because that'll upset like your co-workers and like all of this like office politics that exists. Whereas for me now, what I feel being professional is just being respectful of like other people's feelings. So you don't have to like when people say like, oh, just be yourself, there's a tendency to think that you can just say what you want and do whatever you want. But I don't think that's what people really mean. I think what they literally mean is do what feels comfortable, but still be respectful of other people's feelings. And for me, that's kind of where I now see this like what professionalism should be. Is
Mhm.
that you can do your job and you're doing it well and you know all of the usual stuff around that, but that when you interact with other people, you're not just like harsh and abrasive, and you do take into consideration that what the things that you are saying, how they might affect other people.
And I think it's so much harder to do that when you're in an environment where, especially as a woman, and many intersections that we will speak about as well, being in certain environments, like my previous job, which was very corporate, the masculine energy, I just picked it up over the years because if I didn't, I would be lost in a sea of people talking over me, and I felt like I constantly had to adjust myself to be heard, to be respected, to be listened to. And it's really hard not to then start changing who you are outside of work as well.
Mm,
And I found myself sometimes just being, I like hearing myself and being like, who is that? That's because it's not me, and
yeah.
it's definitely not me. Um, and even though kind of the way you dress isn't everything, when I started to show up and present myself in that way, in the way I dressed, I started to feel more comfortable being myself as well, because I didn't feel like I was stuck in these clothes I didn't feel comfortable in. I was like, this is me, so I can be me outwardly as well. And totally, like you said about professionalism, what you dress has no impact on how you work, how hard you work, how great you can be at your job. What is really important is identifying when you are going that way of becoming someone else, maybe saying something that's just not nice, and being able to recognize it and reel yourself back in and say, whoa, this is a product of my environment, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to well actually my partner who works as a chef, um she and I think to some extent like work environments are work like the environment that is the work environment comes from the type of people that are drawn to that job. So you do get like a certain type of atmosphere, but um working in a kitchen is very you have to be very loud, you have to be very abrasive and um they say, oh we don't have time for like niceties or like softness. You just go, that's wrong, fix it. Um and we've had loads of conversations where she's kind of had a bit of a struggle with how that's the norm, and so that is how you are. Um, but sometimes it's a bit like, yeah, just it's not very nice sometimes, obviously. But at the same time, she's always like, but that is kind of like how that kind of chimes with her personality because she likes to just get stuff done,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a very direct way of getting stuff done. And yeah, so it's hard for her to like, I think sometimes even draw the line between who actually is she compared to like who is she in that environment, because when she comes out of that environment and she comes home she can still be in that kind of like mindset and still be um yeah kind of like on that energy level, and then when she gets after being at home for like a couple of hours you get to see the real
Yeah.
the real her. So it's really interesting that like I feel like in the games industry, it's definitely in the indie space, like um I found this like networking through with other indies over the years that we have a much more chill, welcoming, um, respectful vibe just in general. And when you do meet someone in the indie space and they aren't quite that, you you're kind of a bit like, oh, um, okay. But I think even then, like over time, those tend to be like the newer people, and over like a fairly short period of time, they acclimatize. And I do think mostly that actually they come into it thinking that it's one thing, and if you've come to the game space, that tends to be the vibe that you hold internally anyway.
Yeah. I hear this a lot in my job now, but also I see it on LinkedIn is when things are really stressful, which they are, like working in gaming is not all fun and games, unfortunately. It is stressful. There's deadlines and complications, and you find yourself sometimes slipping into that sort of corporate mindset of that stress, and the stress turns, for me, can turn into that slipping back into my old habits of being more brash than I want to, and slipping into, this old mindset that I had in corporate world. And we say, we make games. We're not, we're supposed to be creating fun and experiences. And if we're not having that, it's going to have an impact on what the
Mhm.
end result is. Even if it's, marketing like what I do, that comes out in what we talk about on social media and in articles and events and how we show up. And players really feel that. So it's really hard to slip back into that, but we make games. And it's really important that we always remember the essence of that and how important it is to our players, and make sure that we are having fun with it as well amongst all the stress. And through that, I think you is where your authenticity comes through, in just remembering why you're here. Like, it's hard to get here. The games industry is hard to break into. And if you're not even going to enjoy it, it's kind of wasted, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. It is incredibly hard to get into the industry, and if once you get in, you're not enjoying it. A, you probably didn't make the right choice, but B, what is more likely is that yeah, you've forgotten that this is what you wanted to do, this is what you love. And if you're not loving it, maybe there's some things that you need to look at in order to make sure that you are enjoying it. I I do this quite a lot because I try and do so many things. I get wrapped up in my head, and I'm like that, th this needs to get done, this needs to get done, this needs to get done. Um, and I find it quite hard sometimes to just kind of find the space to relax and even just reflect and look at the fact that I am in the industry and I am doing what I love. I am making games and networking with people who love the same stuff. And for so many years of my life, like even when I was a freelance creative, because I've always loved creative roles, I didn't, I don't think I ever really had I never really fully loved and enjoyed what I was doing, despite it being the thing that I love to do.
Mm. What do you think was the change for you, or how do you think you have in the past made sure to be true to yourself when you've kind of been showing up at work?
I think along the years, I've always kind of felt it and known that, um, or tried to find workarounds. There's one specific job that I can think of actually where um, it was for a company that dealt with muscle gain products, and everyone there like there was a real gym culture. Like everyone went. We were all going to the gym before work and sometimes during lunch together and sometimes after work together. And everyone turned up every day in either like sportswear or a suit because clients were often in the office. And so you're expected to either be like really smart or really sporty looking, like you like, yeah. Obviously, we had a shower, so, so we were always clean from the gym. We never smelled like the gym, but that was the culture. And so I found that like the way that I could express myself while being there was that I always had like the fanciest of suits. No one else wore waistcoats. I always wore a waistcoat. And I always tried to have, yeah, like this kind of clearly eccentric kind of version of a suit. Um, and quite a lot of the time I wore a hat with some kind of brimmed hat. Um, and that was kind of like comfortable. That was as comfortable as I could get there. I quite enjoyed the camaraderie that we had in general, but I was in sales at the time, so I really wasn't in a happy place in terms of like what I was doing. But yeah, I've always tried to, where possible, just put a bit of myself out there, whether it was well received or not. But same as you, like what you're in an environment where no one else is doing that, and you feel it. Everyone else is towing the line. Everyone's like fully gym gear or sportswear or mostly shirt, like plain white shirt and trousers. And so in a lineup, whenever we had like staff company photos and stuff, everyone would always be like, "Yeah, can you duck down and get your hat out of the way?" Yeah.
Yeah, the people around you make such a difference. I definitely, in my last job, which was very corporate, found my little circle of misfits, which is just what I
Mm,
do in life. I just collect misfits and I really enjoy that. But in my last job, it was really important that and I had to be very conscious about it because I didn't work with anyone who was like me at all. So
mm,
I had to be really conscious of putting in lunches and making sure I just sent messages to people and spent time with those people who were a bit more like me so that I felt less of that pressure because I was like, well, I'm not the only person who's feeling like this. I'm not the only one who sits outside of the box, even though the majority do.
yeah.
And I found finding your people can really make such a difference. which I think is really important when companies have different kind of people networks, whether that's, queer networks or different racial networks and religious networks, to have that space to find people, because it's really hard to otherwise. If you work with a select group of people, and how do you meet other people like you? How do you even know other people are like you without having that?
Mm.
How do you think of like other ways that companies can foster that environment where you feel safe enough to show up as yourself?
I think a lot of companies just need to have an awareness of it. I think a lot of companies don't even really have an awareness that there's anything wrong with it, like with their company culture. And like company culture has become like a major buzzword, especially like over the last 6 years, maybe even more. But like, yeah, definitely more so for like this generation coming up and kind of our generation where culture fit, company fit has become like a really important thing. But a lot of companies use that to say, you need to do what we do. You need to, when you join us, company fit means that this is the expectation of how you will show up here. And it's not a case of company fit, your personality will gel with other people's personalities, which is I think what you should be doing more. Um, but also looking for um me when we're looking at bringing on people, it's always about the passion for what they do, and outside of that, who they are as a person. As long as there's no clear red flags of toxicity, let's say, um, you can be fairly safe to bring people in, and as long as you're mindful of the fact that you are trying to create the space that is more welcoming for more types of people. And I think also to understand that that's a really powerful thing for your company. There's a lot of talk about this online that like you create echo chambers, and if you're just employing the same people who think the same way all the time, then your innovation is going to dry up pretty quick because the same ideas are going to come around time and time again. And when you're in a meeting and you're like, this is the idea, and everyone just nods their head, like you're just running with an idea that came straight out of your head. You're not having any pushback. You're not having any suggested changes. You're not going to know until that hits whatever your target audience is, that it actually just had so much wrong with it. So I think that it's really important to have that. Um, and companies need to kind of have a look at how they hire people and make sure that they are allowing for this space of diversity and not just saying like, yeah, company culture is really important to us. Company fit is like such a big deal, and we really make sure that when really you're just going, here's the cookie cutter mold you need to fit into. Here's the expectations.
Yeah. I hate when I see that, because I just think, is there going to be like a beer fridge and a pool table that
Yeah,
I don't
the
want any
classic.
part of? Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I just want to have the confidence to, like you said, to say, actually, I disagree. And here's my thoughts. And the more diverse people we have in all industries, but absolutely in the game industry, which is so creative, without different backgrounds and, you know, even as granular as class and disability and gender orientation, sexual orientation, you don't discover new things. You don't question new things if you don't have different experiences. If, like you said, it's just cookie cutter, we're all the same people, you're going to do the same things. You're just never going to grow. You're never going to find new fans or new
Mm.
people to bring into your communities, because you're just shouting into the ether of people who expect things from you and get what they expect, and nothing ever changes. And in a creative industry, we just shouldn't do that. It's really important to try new things and push boundaries. And in gaming, it's even more important because we create experiences. And if we don't consider what different people want, we're just losing, like, we're losing the market, a huge part of the market, first of
Mm.
all, if we're talking about, selling games, but also just growing experiences that are outside of the norm is what games is all about. That's why we play games. We did because we want to explore and adventure and do and try things that aren't our everyday, and without letting other people in, you literally just can't do that.
Yeah. There's a real balance to be had as well when it comes to like serving your audience. Like you say, like if you are just because there's a temptation to listen to your audience and to give your audience what they want. And um, Steve Jobs is the classic like antidote to that. He was like, no, I tell the audience what they want, and I go, this is what you want, and then the audience goes, oh yeah, we didn't know it, we wanted that. And in games, you kind of need to have a balance because if you do try Steve Jobs thing of just being like, this is what you wanted, the audience go, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But but at the same time, if you just cater to that audience endlessly, then you end up with um, the loudest voice in your audience gets what they want, and then the rest of your audience absolutely doesn't, and you don't get anything new. And it's the new stuff because even the people that say like this is what we want, this is what we want, they will get bored of you constantly giving them what they want.
Yeah.
I've got two kids, and they I can tell you they get bored if you give them exactly what they want all the time. You have to just go, well, how about this? And they go, oh, I hadn't even thought about that. You go, exactly. So yeah, you need to, and the only way that you can really achieve that is if your company reflects that internally.
Yeah. Whenever I think about authentic self, I always think about the term midlife crisis, which I think is such a funny term. And I always thought of that as exactly, I guess, as I was told it was growing up, in that you get to a certain age and you pick up a weird hobby and it becomes your entire personality.
Yeah.
But having kind of experienced that now, it's not that at all. It's just you get to a point where you're fed up of caring so much about what other people think, and you just find joy and start being loud about the things that bring you joy and start doing it. And you, at that point, have the money to buy your, top down car, or make your shed a game room, or whatever it is.
Mm.
And it's always such a phrase that's like a bad thing. And it's so funny. I just think it's such a great thing to be able to revel in the joy of something that you love. And that is, I think people who are claimed to have having a midlife crisis are being their authentic self, and probably for the first time. And, I mentioned earlier,
That's why it's so stark. It's like they're
yeah.
busting out the shell.
And that's what I found during lockdown, which is when I decided that I was going to work in gaming, because I had all this time to do whatever I wanted as long as it was in my house.
Hmm.
And I got back into gaming, which I'd taken a bit of a break from. And I just said to my partner, like, why don't I work in games? Why have I never considered it? And I'd never considered it because it had never been an option to me. I'd never been surrounded by people who were doing things other than, climbing a career ladder. And, I worked at a company where my dad had worked for 35 years at the time. And it was an eye opener for me to be like, I can do what I want with my career. I can dress how I want. And I, another thing is I'd been kind of the whole dress for the job you want BS.
Mm.
Whereas now I dress because the clothes I have make me happy and make me feel good and make me that I feel comfortable in. And as soon as I started doing that, it was another light bulb moment of, oh, here she is. Like, I'm kind of finding myself again, and looking back on like me as a kid, to, glance upon me now, I'd be like, oh, we did it. Look at us.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing that companies don't think about too much is that if people can wear what they want and show up however they want, like you say, first of all, they're not thinking about um how uncomfortable they are in what they're wearing. But second of all, you're going to get them performing better because they are comfortable at work. And you can come to work in like your cool and fun outfit, and not mostly your colleagues will be like, "Oh, that's a cool fun outfit," and you're like, "Oh, yeah, thanks. I just threw this on this morning," and like you're upbeat, you're ready to go. Like whatever the day hits you with, you're like, "Yeah, no, no worries. I look good today." So I think, yeah, there's lots of stuff. There's lots of benefits to it. Um, we don't need we certainly don't need uniforms that, the company uniform. Yeah, it's nice when you do events to like wear the company brand or whatever, but that's like marketing, that's a whole different thing.
Mhm.
But um yeah, having to be like we're a suits and ties office, or like, um whatever the I don't even know if that truly exists anymore. Maybe if you work on Wall Street or something, but like most offices, yeah, you just have your smartwear. And the only place really where it should still exist are places like warehouses where you have to wear safety wear. Like, and even then, really, you could say you have to wear overalls because it protects your skin, and then you can go buy whatever bloody overalls you want, whether it's like camo or bright pink or, whatever the thing is, allowing people to show up as themselves, even when there are hazardous, dangerous restrictions. It's really, truly powerful.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how hard it is to start doing that, especially if it's new to you that you're like, oh, I'm kind of rediscovering myself and now I want to show up slightly differently to what people in my workplace or people around me are maybe used to. And apart from having a good support network, it really is a really personal journey.
Mm,
And something that you really have to own personally to say, you know what, I have to rise above it. I'm the only person who can show up in the way I want to show up as. And you really have to make a conscious effort to make the change and decide that you're going to do that, whether that's, the way you dress or the way you interact with people. um it's a really big thing, and it's yours to do, which is super scary and really hard. I found it really hard making the transition of showing up slightly differently than I had before. I think
mm,
a lot of people's perspectives of me changed. And in
yeah,
my last job, I was kind of shoved out of a few little cliques that I am very
yeah,
glad, because I didn't want to be part of it anyway.
yeah.
And I was just trying to fit in. But it's not as a warning, but I guess to anyone who is thinking about starting or trying to show up as your authentic self, it is a big change. And I think one that's so worth it, but it's a big thing to own.
I think you and I are probably in a similar situation where I feel like I'm very lucky that in almost every job that I've ever worked in, I've been like a high performer. And that really does give you the power to do this stuff where you can like dress a little bit more eccentric than what everyone else is, because your boss isn't going to go, "That's not appropriate, get out." They're going to go, "Oh, I don't want to get rid of that person. They work so well, they work so hard. If I lost them, it would be a real pain in the bum to replace them." And
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, you and I probably both had that leverage at work. So yeah, if you don't, and that can be really hard for people who are working in jobs where they really just don't care about where they're working. They're just doing it for the paycheck. And maybe that's not the job where you try and, be yourself.
Mm.
Unless you don't care enough that, you could be like, yeah, I'm going to wear what I want. If my boss sends me home, hooray.
Yeah, maybe it's a good place to trial it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I'm very aware that I was quite fortunate with my ability to be able to do that where I was able to do it.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I guess, of owning that for yourself, being aware of other people trying to be authentic at work, I think is really important, especially in games. I think where because and definitely the experiences that I've had, and I'm super lucky in that I really just can show up as myself 100% in the places I work in games. But because it's so good, it might feel almost daunting to show up. And I think it's important that you recognize other people and what they're doing and complimenting how they showed up today or complimenting their clothes, or when you see someone who's maybe looks a bit different today, that you, if it's appropriate, obviously, just
Mm.
mentioning, you know, you love the change, or, and never, I think this goes without saying, anything about weight and changes like that. But,
Mhm.
you know, the style and the way people are showing up to really celebrate the people around you as well and make them feel more empowered to do what you're doing. If you feel, you know, like us, we're at a point where we're quite comfortable in ourselves now, but to notice changes around you and be really conscious that other people might not be, even in environments that are super open. It doesn't mean that everyone
Mm.
feels comfortable showing up as themselves.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to um no, it's not really hard. I think the thing is, yeah, the as long as you're when you're complimenting someone on their looks, as long as you're complimenting on their style, and it's very clear that you're
Yeah.
in admiration of their style, you're in the right place. If you're talking about anything else, then just don't.
Yeah.
Um, and if like us, you want to try and do this in your workspace and you see other people trying to do the same, then yeah, just real